My dear friends, on this fourth Sunday of Advent, the scriptures show us how God works quietly in moments of confusion and fear, both in ancient Judah and in our own lives today. The first reading, taken from the prophet Isaiah, is set during a very tense moment in Israel's history. King Ahaz of Judah was terrified because two neighboring kingdoms, Aram, said Syria, and Israel, also called Ephraim, had formed an alliance and were threatening to attack Jerusalem. The people were shaken, and the king felt trapped. In the middle of this fear, God sent the prophet Isaiah to encourage Ahaz and tell him not to panic because God would not let Jerusalem fall. Through Isaiah, God invited Ahaz to ask for a sign, any sign, as big or as small as he wanted. But Ahaz refused. He pretended that he didn't want to test God. But in reality, he simply didn't trust God. He was already secretly looking to Assyria, a powerful empire, for help. So Isaiah rebukes him, saying that if he will not ask for a sign, God will give one anyway. A young woman shall conceive and bear a son, and shall name him Emmanuel. For King Ahaz and Judah, the sign meant that before this child grew old enough to know right from wrong, the two threatening kingdoms would be destroyed. The message was clear. God is in control and the danger will pass. Christians later see in this prophecy a deeper meaning that goes beyond Ahaz's time. The birth of a child who represents God's presence becomes a sign of the ultimate way God comes close to humanity, in Jesus. This text invites us to trust. Like Ahaz, we often choose our own Assyrias, our own solutions powered by fear. But God's sign of hope often comes quietly, in unexpected and humble ways. Isaiah reminds us that even when we cannot see the path ahead, God remains with us. The promise of Emmanuel is still true today. God enters our fear, brings calm in chaos, and offers a hope stronger than any threat. In the second reading, taken from St. Paul's letter to the Romans, Paul introduces himself as a servant of Christ Jesus, someone completely dedicated to God. He says he is called to be an apostle, meaning he didn't choose this job for himself. God chose him and sent him. His mission is to proclaim the gospel of God, the good news that God had promised long ago through the prophets. This shows that the message of Jesus is not something new or separate from the Old Testament. It is the continuation and fulfillment of God's plan. Paul then explains what the gospel is about: God's Son, Jesus. He highlights two truths about Jesus. First, Jesus is a descendant of David according to the flesh, meaning he is truly human and part of Israel's story. Second, Jesus is declared to be the Son of God in part through his resurrection, showing that he is fully divine and victorious over death. These two sides of Jesus, human and divine, stand at the center of Christian faith. Paul says that through Jesus he received grace and apostleship to bring people of all nations to the obedience of faith. This means the gospel is for everyone, not just for the Jews. Finally, Paul greets them with grace and peace. Grace is God's free gift of love. Peace is the wholeness and calm that comes from God. It's a gentle reminder that the Christian life begins not with fear or pressure, but with God's kindness. When we were setting up the studio, I ordered some chairs online. When they arrived, the parts looked simple enough, so I started assembling the chairs and completed the task easily. However, I realized that the chair was wobbly and one piece was mysteriously left over. After trying everything possible, I finally found the instruction manual and, in all humility, opened it only to quickly realize I had been fixing the wrong pieces in the wrong places. Once I followed the manual, everything fit perfectly. The problem wasn't the chair, it was that I trusted my own understanding more than the instructions. And the gospel taken from Matthew gives us a similar story. Joseph had his own plans, but God's instruction changed everything. The gospel tells the story from Joseph's point of view. In first century Jewish culture, betrothal was a binding contract, like marriage minus cohabitation. Mary and Joseph's stage 1 commitment meant divorce was needed to end it legally. From Joseph's perspective, nothing makes sense. He knows he is not the father. He could have reacted with anger, shame, or revenge. Yet, Joseph chooses a gentle path. He plans to end the engagement quietly so that Mary is not humiliated. But God has a different plan, one Joseph could never have imagined. In a dream, Joseph is asked to do something extremely difficult, to trust God beyond logic, to believe something that does not fit human understanding, and to give up his own plans for the sake of God's plan. Joseph listens and obeys even when the message is confusing, even when it risks his reputation, even when it changes the course of his entire life. His cooperation makes space for God to enter the world. In silently taking Mary as his wife, he becomes part of the mystery of salvation. Joseph's obedience reminds us that God's plan often does not make sense at first. We like clarity, control, and security. Joseph had none of these, yet he chose trust. And because he trusted, the story of Jesus' birth could unfold. Joseph teaches us that faith is not only belief, it is courage in action. If we put ourselves in the place of Joseph, we could feel like asking, what's my fault in all of this? Why should I give up my life, reputation, dreams of my own firstborn, dreams of a normal marriage? And this is the message for each of us. Quite often, it's not about me. Joseph gives up his own dreams, his comfort, and even his social dignity so that God's work can happen. His sacrifice stands beside Mary's yes. Both surrender their lives out of love, allowing God to work through them. In our lives, we too face moments when God's call seems strange or inconvenient. We may feel afraid, uncertain, or unprepared. Joseph encourages us: listen, trust, and cooperate with God's whisper in your heart. Even quiet obedience can lead to extraordinary grace. It could be trusting God when a plan, job, or relationship changes unexpectedly, or saying yes to a quiet responsibility that doesn't seem glamorous, or perhaps cooperating with God even when we don't feel ready. Advent calls us to listen, obey, embrace the impossible. As we move closer to Christmas, may we, like Joseph and Mary, surrender our plans and trust God's surprising ways. When we listen, obey, and allow God to lead, Emmanuel, God with us, becomes real in our lives and in our world. This week, ask yourself, what is the one area of my life where God is inviting me to trust Him more? May God bless us all.